Hi, everyone. This video is going to give you a quick overview of motor pathways. When we talk about motor pathways, the direction that we're talking about is down. So down from the primary motor cortex, down, and then out to the skeletal muscle. So these pathways are actually um, somatic motor pathways or skeletal motor pathways. Remember, somatic motor means that these are voluntary motor pathways, and we know that the only voluntary muscle type is skeletal muscle. So that's the muscle that's attached to our skeleton or our bones. And when we consciously think about initiating movement, these are the muscles that contract. So motor pathways are, very different from sensory pathways, one in which is the direction of movement. So motor pathways go down, right? They start at the brain, they go down the brainstem, down the spinal cord, and then out to muscles. So in our sensory pathway video, we talked about this little sort of homunculus. Homunculus means little man, that the sensory cortex, the primary sensory cortex, was mapped out with different body parts that correlated to areas of the cortex. Well, the same thing is true for the primary motor cortex. So the primary motor cortex, let me annotate this. The primary motor cortex is this gyrus that is right here. This is our primary motor cortex. And the primary motor cortex is also mapped out with areas of the body where there's more muscles. The body part is larger because it takes up more real estate in the primary motor cortex. So you know that you have a lot of muscles, even though they're small muscles, you have a lot of skeletal muscles that allow our fingers to do many different kinds of movements, right? So that takes up a larger area of our primary motor cortex. Same thing with our facial muscles, our mouth, our tongue. That takes up a big area of the primary motor cortex. So again, this is our primary motor cortex. The first neuron involved in a motor pathway are the neurons that originate in the primary motor cortex and then travel down the brainstem and down the spinal cord. These neurons are simply called upper motor neurons. Now, when you're practicing this, I'd like for you to write the entire term. Don't abbreviate. It's just a bad habit to get into, especially if instructors don't like abbreviations. So you would label this neuron as the upper motor neuron. Now that makes sense to me because it's starting at your brain and it's traveling down. So we have the upper motor neuron that kicks off this pathway. The upper motor neuron then simply synapses on this next neuron. So if the red one is the upper motor neuron, then this white one in this image is the lower motor neuron. So you can notice that the vocabulary is different from a motor pathway versus a sensory pathway. The vocabulary is different, which is nice. So you can really distinguish the differences there. So again, we have the primary motor cortex, which you see is this dark brown area. It's mapped out. The primary motor cortex, the origination of the upper motor neuron is here. The upper motor neuron travels down the brainstem, down the spinal cord, crosses over, and then will eventually synapse on the lower motor neuron. Now you can see, because this is a cross section of a spinal cord, that the lower motor neuron exits the cord through the ventral root. And we know that all motor information exits through the ventral root of the spinal cord. The lower motor neuron then goes out to skeletal muscle and innervates that skeletal muscle. The lower motor neuron can tell the skeletal muscle fibers That's just what a muscle cell is called. It tells the skeletal muscle fibers to contract. And that, my friends, is really just the overview of motor pathways. Again, there are different motor pathways that control different muscles. There are different tracts that control different areas of the body. You will be asked to learn some of those pathways. This, again, is just an overview using the terminology like primary motor cortex, upper motor neuron, lower motor neuron. So let's review one more time before I end this video. All right, so first we have this area of the cortex, this gyrus, right? Remember, a gyrus is a bump in the cerebral cortex. This is called the primary motor cortex, right? The primary motor cortex is the area where the upper motor neurons arise. The upper motor neurons travel down, 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 down. Upper motor neuron then synapses on the lower motor neuron. The lower motor neuron is the only one that exits the central nervous system. It exits through the spinal cord. And where does it go? It goes to skeletal muscles, because we are talking about somatic motor pathways, voluntary motor pathways, which only involves skeletal muscles. Now, if you were going to be moving your hand, right? Let's say you're writing or you're typing. If you're writing or typing, the primary motor cortex area that becomes active would be this area here. It would be the hand area. So your upper motor neurons would be firing from this area of the cortex if you're using your hand. If you're talking, then this area of the primary motor cortex would be firing. These upper motor neurons would be firing because you're talking. Now, I talk with my hands. So I talk, my face is moving, the muscles in my face are moving, my hands are moving. So I'm lighting up this entire area of the cortex because both things are going on, right? So again, I just think it's very cool that it's mapped. Only specific areas of our cortex will be firing for certain activities, for certain muscle activities. So again, primary motor cortex is involved in motor pathways. The neuron that starts off the pathway is called the upper motor neuron. Upper motor neuron synapses on lower motor neuron. Lower motor neuron exits the cord and goes out and innervates or delivers the electrical signal to muscle fibers, which are skeletal muscle cells. Thanks, everyone.